Well, the fact that abortion is a constitutionally protected right means that anything that challenges that is going to be unconstitutional according to our current Constitution. So really that question kind of points out the need for what we're doing more than any problem with what we're doing. So it's, really it's kind of a truism. It's, well, abortion is a constitutionally protected right, so what all of us in this room want to do is to prevent abortion from being carried out under the law, and therefore anything that challenges that is going to be held unconstitutional. So we need to challenge that. We need to get our arguments out there and hopefully change that through our movement.
A comment or?
I saw a question out there. I don't know how we should do this. Should we all speak and then?
Yeah, this is low key. Yeah.
I have a question. Where in the Constitution is abortion legal?
Yeah.
Where
Okay.
is honor seen it?
Yeah, well, of course, I can't, this is like a whole semester of law, but it started with the first Supreme Court ruling that said that they have judicial overview, that they get to decide cases, and that would become the supreme law of the land. That was like shortly after the founding of our nation. And so they've just had incredible power. And of course, the right to privacy is not found in the Constitution. And I'll never forget my first, I had a great conservative professor at a liberal college in undergrad. And when we covered Roe v. Wade in this con law class, or we covered Griswold versus Connecticut, he had a boombox sitting there, and he wasn't in the room, and he waited till we all got in, and he walked up, picked up the book, and he began reading the opinion of the court in Griswold versus Connecticut to the tune of the Twilight Zone. And it was just classic, because they're sitting there talking about these like zones, of privacy emanating out of the bill, and it's like, you're just pulling this out of nowhere, aren't you? Douglas was just, it's like he was making it up as he goes along. And clearly they just created this whole right to privacy. They created this whole right to an abortion. The fact is that it's all about who is in power, who the justices are. I was so frustrated with people who would say, well, I quit voting pro-life because, what does it matter? Bush and the Republicans were in power and they didn't make abortion illegal. And it's like they have no understanding of how our system works now and just the way things are. And I talk to people who are constitutionalists, and they're just like, well, it's not in the Constitution. It's like we're just banging our heads. The fact is, the way things are now, we have to work within this framework to be able to get this overturned.
The framework is messed up.
It is,
abortion
but
is felony homicide. That's what it is. It's felony homicide. And to say it's otherwise is to go against God's law. God's law says, thou shalt do no murder. And, before 1973 in the United States, abortion is looked upon 100 years ago as murder. And it is, because, look at the evidence. The babies have been killed by abortion. That's a baby, a human being, and they need protection. So
I might add a little bit to that first question too, because we get that a lot as well. This is unconstitutional, and I think this is a legal panel, but I think it's important for us to not just look at this from a legal perspective, because of that, it's almost we get asked that a lot, and it's almost an insulting question. And it's almost demeaning. Well, you're doing this, you're doing personhood, and it's just going to get thrown out by the courts. These lawyers, like say Prop 8 in California, for instance, is just going to throw this out. It's a big a waste of time and money. You are a fool for working on personhood. Well, the answer to that is this. Personhood, as my great brother Walter says, has the power to save the soul of the nation. In Colorado, for instance, because there's a personhood amendment on the ballot, and what we're doing, we've been able to distribute over 300,000 pro-life materials educating the people. We've interacted with over 1 million people in the state of Colorado because we're working on personhood. And when we're educating them on the fundamental goal of the personhood movement, and that is the personhood rights of the preborn child. So I'm the moderator, I'm not here to speak, but I just wanted to make that point that that question actually goes a little bit outside the legal realm, because at the end of the day, we don't really care what a liberal judge has to say. You know, at the end of the day, they don't matter. So,
Well,
Johanna.
I would just add that this could be said of any pro-life initiative, that it could be found unconstitutional, and it's never a waste of time and money because you've reached people. And also, if it was struck down, you have, well, we were discussing it as yesterday, a groundswell of grassroots opposition to what happens in whatever court this might get tripped up in. This will only rally the grassroots base even more, because the public, the majority of Americans are pro-life. We know that from polling, and I don't put much weight in polling, but we can have that confidence that we do have the nation behind us to push for this. And I don't see why we should be afraid of a court.
And, okay, and then just to clarify, first of all, I don't think the way things would play out, that it would be the personhood amendments per se that would be found unconstitutional. I think that it would be the subsequent statutes that would be enacted, or prosecutors implementing the current homicide statutes to protect unborn children, and then that would then be legally challenged and could be held unconstitutional if they have a majority on the Supreme Court. What we need to do is we need to help the strict constructionist judges, okay? The conservative justices on the Supreme Court are not going to read things in that they don't see, and we need to help them along. And I've heard this suggestion that people are worried about some of these justices that we have that we think are pro-life, because we don't want to see this issue just tossed back to the states. We don't want to see a majority of the Supreme Court get a pro-life majority and then have them just simply overrule Roe v. Wade and toss it to the states, for the states to decide, because that's not going to end abortion in this country. What we need to do is to help the court, the strict constructionist judges, so that they can look and they can say that unborn children are recognized as persons in the full legal sense, which is what Roe v. Wade, the judges in Roe v. Wade addressed that issue. And they said, they did a survey of American law, and they said, we do not find that they're recognized as persons in the full sense. Well, with personhood, it will be absolutely clear that they are recognized as persons in the full sense. And then the strict constructionist judges can then find not only is there no right to privacy, no right to an abortion under the Constitution, but they can then find that unborn children are entitled to their 14th Amendment due process right not to be deprived of their right to life, and also can find that they're entitled to equal protection under the laws. That's what we want. But if we don't have personhood in place, it's going to be more difficult for these strict constructionist judges to say that they're recognized as persons in the full sense. And I don't agree with them not recognizing them in the full sense, but the fact is that some of them are so fastidious that they're not going to read something that's not there. So we want to help them so that when the time is right, we'll have an end to abortion. Is this not working?
Bobby, you want to speak to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I would also point out the other sort of legal ramification that I see from a personhood amendment, hopefully the one in Colorado that people are going to be voting on in 50 days, from something like that passing. And that is the question of states' rights. And of course, we don't, our goal is not to have abortion illegal just in Colorado and, legal in New York and California. But some of the judges, like Justice Scalia, have said, the right to an abortion is not found in the Constitution, but the right of the child to not be murdered through abortion is also not found in the Constitution. So I think there's a feeling there in some of the judges, some of the Federalist judges, that it's up to the state to decide. And so I think the personhood question would also trigger a question about whether a state has the right to exercise the 10th Amendment rights to protect their own citizens above and beyond what the federal Constitution requires, which really, with regards to the preborn, is nothing at all. And that's a question that ties into a whole wave, a sentiment that's in the country right now with sort of the federal overreaching, with health care, with taxes, with sort of the federal tyranny that the country's experiencing. And it's something that I think helps our cause quite a bit. And that's having the state be able to assert some form of sovereignty. And what better way to do it than by protecting all of its citizens. So that could be a question. I think that's a legitimate question.
And normally the states have a right to expand rights. They're not allowed to abridge or restrict rights, but they are allowed to expand rights. And so, the other thing is that we're not conceding, like this kind of goes back to your question, by fighting for personhood, we're not conceding that, like, oh, we have to do this because abortion's in the Constitution, and so now we have to do this. That's not what's happening. Just like with the slavery efforts, they weren't conceding that, oh, slavery is okay in the Constitution, but they took the step to amend the Constitution to make it absolutely clear that this is the way it should have been from the beginning within the Constitution. And so I think that by passing personhood, by working on these efforts, we're not conceding, oh, it's necessary because abortion is in the Constitution. We're just making sure that it's legally recognized and that these judges can no longer manipulate the situation.